America's decades-long flight to the suburbs is starting to reverse course. One sign of that is ridership on public transit last year hit the highest level since the 1950s. And that is just one part of a gradual demographic shift that is revitalizing America's urban cores. For the first time in almost a century, urban growth rates in 2011 at 1.1% outpaced suburban growth rates at 0.9%, and that's compared to the previous year. The suburbs, don't get me wrong, they still have their appeal, including space, backyards, good schools. But now new suburbs are starting to get built in more urbanized patterns with compact residential dwellings placed within walking distance of commercial areas and public transit. Demographic changes, including smaller families, labor market changes, and a fluctuating housing market are leading more middle-class Americans to live, not just work, but live in cities. Long neglected urban cores from Los Angeles and Chicago are being redeveloped in the process as America starts to embrace the kind of high-density living that you find here in New York City or in Europe or in Asia. And new businesses are taking notice. High-tech startups are shifting from suburbs to cities, making urban areas the new scene for America's tech hubs. That's according to a report by the Martin Prosperity Institute, which followed the money to reach this conclusion. It showed that more venture capital money than ever flowed into startups in urban centers like New York City, Los Angeles, and San Francisco in 2011. This marks a new development in the world of innovation, which has long been dominated by areas like Silicon Valley, Boston's Route 128 corridor, or the Research Triangle of North Carolina. Now, nobody knows these issues better than Richard Florida. He's the author of the report, Startup City, The Urban Shift in Venture Capital and High Technology. He's one of the world's leading urban theorists, working closely with governments and companies worldwide. He's a professor at the University of Toronto and New York University. Richard, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to see you, Ali. Thanks for having me on.
Your first take on this, your initial take, what are the implications of startups and venture capital thinking cities are interesting?
Well, we've known for a while, as you said, talented people are moving back to urban centers. America is re-urbanizing. People are moving to these urban cores and these walkable transit-served suburbs. But I think what really shocked me, really surprised me, even someone who studies these trends, was the sweeping shift of venture capital and startups back to the city. We found that yes, Silicon Valley is still attracting about $4 billion in startup activity a year, but San Francisco in the urban core is attracting $7 billion.
Huh.
And right there in lower Manhattan, an area, Manhattan and New York used to collect venture capital and send it out to the Boston suburbs,
right,
the Silicon Valley suburbs. Right in lower Manhattan, more than $3 billion in venture capital finance startups. So I think this urbanization, this urban shift in startups is the most shocking, if you will, and dramatic example of the comeback of our city.
And it's for many of the same reasons why Americans are actually urbanizing. They're just liking what cities have to offer. Companies, startups can find the workforce in these cities. What else is it?
Well, our research shows, we looked at this and did a statistical analysis that really are three factors. The first one is the talented people who want to be part of these new startups. A growing share, not all of them, some still want to be in the burbs, but a growing share want to be in urban centers. They're demanding to be in urban centers. So the startup companies are moving there, or they're forming them in the urban centers. The second thing, and it relates to your previous guest, startups need to be around diversity. In Silicon Valley, historically, anywhere from 1/3 to 50% of the startups had an immigrant, a non-American, somebody from outside the country on a founding team. Well, where do immigrants head? They head to large metro areas and the urban core. And the third factor is technology itself is changing. In the old days, you were making a box. You were making a piece of hardware. You were making maybe a piece of software. Now, the new technology companies, from digital media to social media, are making products that need to be close to those end users, those big media company or the customers of those companies. So for those three factors are really driving this shift of startups and venture capital back to our
Richard,
cities.
you love cities as I do, but when things like this happen, some people get worried. Is my rent going up? Are these people going to price me out of my own city? You see some of this happening in California with those Google and Yahoo buses where people are mad about driving up the cost of property and things like that.
Oh, it's a huge problem. In fact, my next report, and we'll talk about it, we're releasing in a few months, is on our newly divided city. Here's what happened. We built in the suburbs. We had an American dream which pushed people to the suburbs. We didn't build enough in the cities, so we don't have enough housing. And what's worse, we don't have enough transit. So what's happening? Richer people, technology companies are flooding into the cities, and we don't have enough transit to connect others. I call this a crisis of public goods, of public infrastructure. So we have to build more housing. We have to build more infrastructure. We have to build more transit so everybody can be connected. But here's the thing. The Bloomberg Philanthropies did a study this past week, and here's what they found. Yes, about 2/3 of people in San Francisco are pissed as hell that techies are driving up prices, as they should be. But you know what? 3/4 of the people at San Francisco were smart, just like your previous guest said. They want more tech companies because it provides better jobs, not only direct jobs, 2, 3, 4 spin-off jobs. Better yet, 6 in 10 people in San Francisco thought the buses and the tech workers were being blamed for problems they didn't create. Tech companies are good for cities, but we need more affordable housing, and we need more transit, and we need better jobs for regular working class folk. And I think that's what we need, a new social compact, a new American dream that's urban, where we're building more housing, creating better jobs, and having better transit, not just for the elite, but for everyone.
Richard, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for this, and you can catch Richard's latest article on this in The Atlantic. Richard Florida is a professor at the University of Toronto and New York University, and a senior editor at The Atlantic. And that is our show for today. I'm Ali Velshi.